Good morning, everyone, and welcome to Empty Cloud Monastery. My name is Sāmaṇera Nipako, and today I will be going over a short sutta with you all, the Anottappīsutta, Samyutta Nikaya 16.2. Before beginning, we'll do a short homage to our original teacher, Shakyamuni Buddha, who is the reason why we're all gathered here today. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Buddhaṃ dhammāṃ saṅghāṃ namasāmi. So, hello to Rebecca, hello to Rhythmic Freedom. Hope that both of you and whoever else is tuning in live or later in the day or at some other point of time is also doing well. If at any point during the talk you have any questions, feel free to put them into the comments and I will get to them at the end. If you would like to read along with me, there is a link to this sutta in the description. We will be using Bhante Sujato's translation. So the Anottappīsutta, Imprudent, Samyutta Nikaya 16.2. So I have heard. At one time, Venerable Mahakassapa and Venerable Sariputta were staying near Varanasi in the deer park at Isipatana. Then, in the late afternoon, Venerable Sariputta came out of retreat, went to Venerable Mahakassapa, and exchanged greetings with him. When the greetings and polite conversation were over, he sat down to one side and said to Mahakassapa, Reverend Kassapa, it's said that without being keen and prudent, you can't achieve awakening, extinguishment, and the supreme sanctuary from the yoke. But if you are keen and prudent, you can achieve awakening, extinguishment, and the supreme sanctuary from the yoke. To what extent is this the case? I absolutely love when exchanges like this happen in the suttas, where we have two arahants discussing the Dhamma together. In particular, I enjoy when Sariputta goes and asks other bhikkhus or bhikkhunis about points in the Dhamma, because you would think, oh, they're enlightened, and especially Sariputta, so they should know the answer to this. But because Sariputta went out of his way to have this conversation with Mahakassapa, we're now able to benefit from the fact that this was recorded. Somebody remembered it. So Sariputta didn't need to ask Mahakassapa this question. I'm sure he was perfectly capable of answering it himself. But I also don't think that he asked it with the intention of the fact that he knew he could answer it. He wanted it to be something that people like you and me, or other people that are at some stage along the path and aren't an arahant, could use to benefit their practice. And this is a relatively common question, although it's phrased differently. What do I need to do to attain awakening? And this short little sutta goes over in brief some of the things that need to be done. And as implied here, that means being keen and prudent. If you're not keen and prudent, then awakening is not likely to happen, if at all possible. So the conversation continues. Reverend, take a mendicant who doesn't foster keenness by thinking. If unarisen, unskillful qualities arise in me, they'll lead to harm. If I don't give up arisen, unskillful qualities, they'll lead to harm. If I don't give rise to unarisen, skillful qualities, they'll lead to harm. If arisen, skillful qualities cease in me, they'll lead to harm. That's how you're not keen. And this little paragraph here contains so much. A lot of the time, especially in Western circles, people will tend to push aside these preliminary prerequisites if one is meditating for enlightenment. If you actually want to get anywhere, if you want to have depth in wisdom, if you want your meditation and other practices to lead towards enlightenment, one of the prerequisites is paying attention to your skillful and your unskillful qualities. If you're not paying attention to these things, then you're liable to make a lot of mistakes, both for yourself and for the other people around you. They'll lead to harm. So, throughout the day, anybody that's not an arahant is going to have many, many opportunities to take note of unskillful qualities that are arising in them. They might be really blatant and coarse, or they might be much finer. A more coarse example might be somebody who you just insult them a little bit, which you shouldn't be doing anyway, but maybe you see somebody else insulting them a little bit, or just critiquing their work. It's okay, but it could be better, and it's not the final product. And they just explode. They get so upset. You told me to do it this way, now you're asking me to do it that way. You never think anything I do is good enough, and they just yelling at this person, or are in other ways very clearly visibly upset in an unskillful way. It could also be something much more fine. It could be the same situation, and you have or this other person has a history, and you can just pick up on their body language or their choice of words, their tone of voice, any other potential physical cues that you know that they're unhappy, that they're perturbed, that there's an unwholesome state going on there. So you have this whole spectrum. And in the instances of people who are in coarse forms of it in particular, and speaking from my own experience, when anger in particular was much more coarse, I wasn't even aware of it. It was obvious to everybody around me, and many of my family members. When they get angry, it's not obvious to them, but it's obvious to everyone around them. So, by not owning or by not seeing or not acknowledging whatever the specific situation might be for that person as to why they don't see it, if they don't do something to reduce the unwholesomeness, to try to bring up skillful qualities, or at least step out or do something to reduce the unskillful portion of it, it leads to a lot of harm. I'm sure you've seen it in yourself and with others. There is no shortage of examples of people that have arisen unskillful qualities that for some reason they're either unwilling or unable to take care of in the moment. On the flip side, for arisen skillful qualities, I often see in Western circles in particular, people are very happy to brush their skillful qualities under the rug, unless they're doing something like running a multi-million-dollar nonprofit organization that feeds starving children in such and such a country, or supplying medical supplies to areas that are struck by a disaster zone. They're like, It doesn't count. It's no big deal. And it's a good way to also cause harm to yourself by not acknowledging those skillful qualities. Because if you don't acknowledge them, you may still continue to do them just because there's a part of you that feels like they're right to do. But I've seen this really affect people's ability to have loving kindness towards themselves. One of the most common patterns I see in people that have this problem of being able to share metta with themselves is exactly this. They don't like to acknowledge their skillful qualities. If you know where you're skillful, if you know where you're unskillful, so where you're doing well and where you can have a little bit of work being done, that points you in a direction of where you need to go. I'm doing well with this. I need to continue to have these skillful qualities arising. I'm not doing so well here. I need to work on my anger. I need to work on my greed. I need to work on my delusion and how it feeds into itself and both greed and anger. And it might not be so straightforward. We all have blind spots. So this is where Kalyanamitas come in. People like Sariputta and Mahamoggallana, or even if you have some spiritual friends you can connect with online, even better if you can go in person, even if it's only for a weekend, once or twice a year. You can get so much good feedback from being around Kalyanamitas. So fostering these attitudes, may my unskillful qualities decrease, may my skillful qualities increase, and may I pay attention to the conditions. Because if you don't know what's causing the unwholesome to arise, you're not going to be able to do as much about it. You'll continue to put your foot in your mouth, which you, as part of the learning process, likely will be doing anyway, and that's fine. We're going to have to touch the hot stove as many times as we need to until we learn not to do it anymore. But each time it happens, you can pay attention to why, and gradually, you'll understand the circumstances, physical and mental cues. And at some point, you'll decide not to do it, or you'll think about not doing it and then do it anyway, which for some things is part of the process. So, continuing with the sutta, some of which I've touched upon already. And how are you not prudent? Take a mendicant who doesn't foster prudence by thinking. If unarisen, unskillful qualities arise in me, they'll lead to harm. If I don't give up arisen, unskillful qualities, they'll lead to harm. If I don't give rise to unarisen, skillful qualities, they'll lead to harm. If arisen, skillful qualities cease in me, they'll lead to harm. That's how you're not prudent. That's how, without being keen and prudent, you can't achieve awakening, extinguishment, and the supreme sanctuary from the yoke. So some of this I had already touched on when talking about not fostering keenness. So to just briefly reiterate, as it says here, if unarisen, unskillful qualities arise in me, they'll lead to harm. So maybe right now there's no very coarse on unwholesome qualities in you, but then something changes, and it might not be necessarily obvious, and you see this unwholesome quality arising in you. How can that lead to harm? How has this led to harm in the past? For example, if you have a tendency towards the unwholesomeness of being sad, how do you use that as a dagger against yourself? Just trying to understand it. This is how I feel. This is what it is. and I can work with it. I don't have to stab myself again. How can I be comfortable being uncomfortable? Sadness, in particular, is one of those things that I had a lot of practice with in my early days, um, much of my childhood and my adolescence. So it was a constant learning opportunity. How do I use this sadness to hurt myself and other people? And for me in particular, it was mostly myself. So I would pay attention to the different patterns in which I would do that. And sometimes just by paying attention to that, the sadness would either go away or it would at least take the sting away. I was at that point able to function and do whatever I needed to do, even though that painful stinging of the sadness was still there. So it added a little bit of a gap for wholesome qualities to arise. At some point, I was able to start to be patient with myself or with other people that I felt like were contributing to the situation I was in, and recollect what's good about them and what is good about me. And before I was able to begin to understand these conditions and how to work with it, there was absolutely no space for me to be able to recollect my good aspects or theirs, or allow for other wholesome states as applicable to whatever the situation was to arise. So, by paying attention to your body and your mind, the different cues you get, there are cues, they just may not always be obvious. You can work with being aware of when unarisen states, wholesome or unwholesome, arise, and when arisen states, wholesome or unwholesome, cease. And as just a little plug in there, this is also a wonderful way to observe impermanence and not self. And once I began to realize that these arisen unwholesome states were impermanent in particular, it gave so much relief. Even if my mind was telling me it's going to be this way forever, I had finally started to see that's not true. It might be this way for a while, I might be uncomfortable for a while, but it will end. And on the flip side, it also allowed me to appreciate when things were well, because this is also going to end. Something is going to change. Even if things still stay well, the quality of wellness or what is causing the wellness is also going to change. And it also then allowed me to take these things less personally, because this is not only true for me, this is true for everybody around me. Impermanence and not self. So, moving on to the next paragraph. And how are you keen? Take a mendicant who fosters keenness by thinking. If unarisen, unskillful qualities arise in me, they'll lead to harm. If I don't give up arisen, unskillful qualities, they'll lead to harm. If I don't give rise to unarisen, skillful qualities, they'll lead to harm. If arisen, skillful qualities cease in me, they'll lead to harm. That's how you're not keen. So, the main difference here between the previous paragraphs and this one is for the not keen. Reverend, take a mendicant who doesn't foster keenness by thinking. And then in this one, how are you keen? Take a mendicant who fosters keenness by thinking. So basically doing what I have previously said and trying to avoid being unaware of these types of mental states or trying to become familiar with them. It'll take however long it takes. It's not a process that we can rush. And then the last paragraph is also very similar to the previous one on prudence. And the difference is basically the same. And how are you prudent? Take a mendicant who fosters prudence by thinking, if unarisen, unskillful qualities arise in me, they'll lead to harm. If I don't give up arisen unskillful qualities, they'll lead to harm. If I don't give rise to unarisen skillful qualities, they'll lead to harm. If arisen skillful qualities cease in me, they'll lead to harm. That's how you're prudent. That's how, if you're keen and prudent, you can achieve awakening, extinguishment, and the supreme sanctuary from the yoke. So, with this last sentence, to reiterate what I had said at the beginning one more time, this keenness, this prudence is a prerequisite. It is not optional. If you want to achieve awakening, extinguishment, nibbana, this keenness, this prudence is necessary. It is not something separate from the practice. It is not something different. It is something to be practiced all day. It is great to practice off the cushion. If you have a job, I'm sure you interact with other people. And if you don't, and you just have yourself, like maybe you work from home most of the time, or you have some sort of remote wilderness work or something, you still have your mind and your body, and however it is reacting in a wholesome or unwholesome way to the environment around you. So take advantage of this. So many people will meditate for 10, 20, 30 minutes in the morning and maybe again in the evening, and that's it. They don't bring their practice off the cushion. And because they don't do so, they have minimal results. If for half an hour a day, you're training your mind to be calm, happy, and peaceful, and to pay attention to what's going on, and for the other 23 and a half, you're still doing what you were doing before, your progress is going to be very slow or very negligible. So this is a great practice to do off the cushion because it is accessible everywhere. You cannot go anywhere without your mind and your body. So highly recommend tapping into it. And the more you do this enthusiastically, even though it might be painful, there might be things that you see that you're not very happy to see about yourself. And you might even see things that are actually great about yourself that you didn't see before. It will help lead you so much more exponentially and will help out your meditation a lot. Something to note as well is the purpose of this isn't necessarily to help your meditation. It is a prerequisite. The Noble Eightfold Path, everything helps each other out, and this is no exception. So we can accept, or not accept, we can respect this sutta with saying 3 sadhus, and then I will go into the comments and see if there's any questions. Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu. All right. So we have a couple bots that I see in the comments, so I'm going to take care of that real quick. And then I will go into the questions. Okay. So, hello Rebecca, hello Jayanta, Rhythmic Freedom, Sunya Anagarika, Christopher Hahn, and Brianna. So the first question I see is from Sunya Anagarika. So the sutta references are almost always in the titles. So here it is Anottappīsutta, Samyutta Nikaya 16.2. And you can also find the link to this in the description for this video. Christopher Hahn asks, can one achieve liberation with wisdom without Sila and Samadhi? Because there were monks did achieve liberation by listening to Dhamma. So this is a good question. Sila is a absolutely necessary prerequisite to enlightenment for all stages. It is not an option. You will see in many, many, many places that the Buddha will mention that beings don't, you don't kill, you don't steal, you don't commit sexual misconduct, you don't lie, and you don't take intoxicants that cause heedlessness. And then from there, he will go into other stages of the path. You will especially see this in various suttas related to the gradual training. So Sila is the bedrock. It is the base. It is your foundation. If you do not have strong Sila, Nibbana of any type is not possible. As far as Samadhi, this is a debate that I'm aware of in the scholastic world. Some say, yes, you can up to non-returner without Samadhi. And others say that you need Samadhi, so jhana, for even stream entry. This is part of a larger project I'm doing right now in terms of the suttas to see where these things actually come up. So I don't have a particular opinion on it at the moment, as I'm still reading through the suttas about this. But Sila, absolutely, and jhana to some extent or another, depends upon which level of awakening you're talking about. Yes, it just depends upon people's interpretation, and whatever I find, I don't think is going to end this debate anyway. So Christopher then asks, also, Lord Buddha mentioned we Savakas, listeners of Dhamma. Moreover, Buddha went around teaching Dhamma and not asking them to meditate. So yes, you will see in a lot of suttas for lay people that they aren't taught to meditate. And this is another thing I'm looking through right now, if there's instances where he does. But in all of them that I have seen for lay people, not necessarily Brahmins, but lay people in general, he will teach them about Sila. And this is because if somebody wants to have a good rebirth and have a higher likelihood to access the Dhamma again in a future lifetime, may it be the next one while the Buddha's dispensation is still around, or when there is a Buddha again in the future, if you have strong morality, the 5 precepts is the bare minimum to be reborn as a human again. For anything below the human realm, it's very difficult to practice the Dhamma because of how much pain there is, or how much instinctual pressure there is to act out in however they need to, or circumstance. For example, if you're reborn as a carnivore, it is really, really hard to practice the first precept. So it's important for your long-term conditionality. I think that's all I'll have to say for that one. And then Rebecca says, when I'm going through the day, I am noticing the habit of ill will and criticism that runs on. I get a little frozen with fear. Any advice about skillful ways to shift this in the moment? So, if you mean habit of ill will and criticism towards yourself, then one way you can do is ask yourself, or one thing you can do is ask yourself, why am I doing this? What am I attached to? What did I do that is attacking my sense of self? For example, maybe you think I'm somebody that is really good with my right speech. And then somebody says or does something that brings up something old in you haven't seen in a long time, or maybe you see it regularly, and you don't partake in right speech. That could lead to self criticism and really beating yourself up, or also having ill will towards that person. Like, man, I can't believe that they said this. How could they? So, if I have that happening, I will look towards what I feel is being attacked. What about my sense of self is not aligning with what I think? What am I clinging to? And that's even more broad way you can do it. What am I clinging to? If there is suffering, there is clinging to something. So just being willing to explore it, to really look at it. And if it's too much pressure at the time, you can shelve it for now and you can come back to a little bit later when you have the space to be able to do so. Another way you can work towards it is being like, okay, I messed up, or I feel uncomfortable with this criticism someone else is giving me, whether it is right or wrong. Again, what am I clinging to? What expectations did I have? If you are being rightly criticized, either by yourself or another person, you can also then celebrate the fact that this is a Kalyanamita. This is like a pure, beautiful diamond. They have shown you an area where you can improve, especially if it's not about worldly stuff. But this also does apply to worldly things. So if your conduct wasn't very good and someone points it out, that's uncomfortable to hear. But it allows us to grow in the Dhamma. Without that, we would have a lot more blind spots that are very difficult to see and clear out. One other way you can deal with it or work with it, especially if it is causing a lot of suffering, is to recollect your good deeds. I messed up here, yes, but for the last week, I've been doing really good. I did this, I did that, I maintained my sila here and there. This is like a lump of salt being thrown into a lake. I will still have the consequences of this action, but I know I am doing a lot of good deeds. And if it was something that was really big, then this would be where you can sit down with the people involved and try to figure out a resolution. And at the same time, use it as a learning opportunity. What's done has been done. So, if nothing else, you can learn what caused it, what conditions came together, and a way to not have it happen again, which you can also rejoice in, because then that means the harm that happened to you and to anybody around you is less likely to happen again. But I really, really, really especially recommend the Sila Nusati. It's a good way to balance out ill will towards ourselves, from ourselves, or from others when we are in a moment of criticism. Hello, Brienne. Hello, Dilani. Hello, Bhavana Chandrasekhar. How to practice Buddhism with non-practitioners. In my experience, it doesn't usually work very well. So it's more you practicing on your own, because you can't expect other people who aren't Buddhist to act in a Buddhist way. You honestly can't even expect people who call themselves Buddhists to act in a Buddhist way. There are a lot of people out there who say they are Buddhists and they act in ways that are very, very worthy of criticism and censure. So all you can do is take care of your own practice. Some of these I went over with Rebecca a moment ago with the idea of ill will and criticism. So, for example, you're at a workplace and somebody criticizes you rightly or wrongly. And let's say it is wrong in this case. You did everything you were supposed to do. you did it correctly, but the other person misunderstands or just doesn't like it or whatever the situation may be. In that moment, that is an opportunity to pay attention to your mind and your body and try to respond in a skillful way. And if you do respond in an unskillful way, again, golden opportunity to understand the causes and conditions that led to it. What is going on? What am I clinging to? What is being attacked? What don't I understand? What don't I see? Just looking at all the variables, and don't expect immediate answers either. Likewise, you can practice equanimity. There is a sutta, I think it's, I want to see Majjhima Nikaya 147 or something like that. It's either in the 30s or the 40s, where the Buddha goes over different ways to work with people. It's titled, if I did get the number wrong, "Is This What You Think of Me?" And in this sutta, if people are not acting well, or if you need to criticize somebody, one of the ways that he recommends is if it would cause you trouble, if it would hurt their feelings, if you don't think that you can bring them to the path again, so that they're too stubborn and they don't like to give up their thoughts and their opinions easily, do not underestimate equanimity towards a person like this. So if you're dealing with difficult non-Buddhists, do not underestimate equanimity towards their behaviors. It is a very powerful tool. And also just lead by example. When I was still a layperson, just by following the 5 precepts, by doing my best to follow right speech in particular, I saw people change. And I saw how they interacted with me was different than how they interacted with other people. So while you can't control what other people do or what they say or anything at all, you can still influence their behavior by being a good example. And sometimes this is the most powerful thing to do. In the Saka Samyutta, I forget which number, but it's the one where Saka and Vepasiti, the lord of the Asuras, have been basically an ancient equivalent of a rap battle. And one of the things that Saka says is that one of the most difficult battles to win is not getting angry at somebody else who is angry. Or to bring it to this sutta, any unwholesome state. So if somebody is being greedy, delusional, or angry, it is a battle hard to win to not let them overwash you and then act out unskillfully. So you practice with non-practitioners by practicing as well as you can and using the things that they say and do as practice opportunities to increase your own good qualities. And if it's really unwholesome, if it's really not beneficial, then you might have to change your circumstances and see if you shouldn't be around these people anymore. So it all depends. Hello, Delani. Hello, Maria. And hello, Mama A. So Delani asks, in a situation when you experience unskillfulness, what is the guided way of interacting towards self or the others? So this is a very broad question because the unskillfulness that you could be experiencing and the situation is always going to be different. And if it is a common pattern, that's where this becomes a little bit easier to answer more concretely. So I've given a couple of examples of this throughout the talk already, like if you're at work and somebody's difficult, or a difficult family member, or even if you have unskillfulness towards yourself, you'll have to look at your own mind and see what is going on. And if you really have no idea, if you're just like, I know I'm getting angry when I get insulted, or I know I'm getting angry when I get feedback, even if it's good feedback, then you can go to somebody about that specific situation, somebody you trust, somebody that you think is wise, and ask them about it. And the more information you can give, the easier it'll be for them to be able to help you. So, for example, one of the things that I noticed when I was working on my aversion in particular was there was one day at work where one of my coworkers said something completely unrelated to me, but due to what was going on at the time, it made me so angry. I was this close to opening my mouth, but I didn't want to cause any workplace discord. And because by not opening my mouth, I was forced to sit with how I was, it was the first time I ever realized that when I get angry, like a finger snap, even briefer than that, my vision briefly changes. If I sweat and if I shake a little bit, these were all indications that I was starting to get angry. So, what I would do in situations like this was be like, okay, I gotta put the brakes on. I am getting angry. As if I continue to see this increase, cannot open my mouth, or if I do, I have to be incredibly careful with my words. And once I noticed these things, I was able to notice more and more subtle movements, especially in my mind, because I knew what to look for in my body. And the body, for many people, is much more honest and coarse than the mind is. So when you're experiencing unskillfulness, a way I would start is listen to your body, pay attention to your mind, and then that will guide you. What are the cues, both wholesome and unwholesome? And if you begin to understand those cues, then you can begin to act more skillfully and not feel scared or intimidated when they show up because they'll be familiar. And as time goes on, as you become more familiar, as you put your foot in your mouth, as you successfully don't put your foot in your mouth, you'll be able to navigate these in such a way that the skillfulness will continue to increase. That path will become more and more well worn, and your unskillfulness will decrease, and that path will start to grow weeds and trees and become impassable. So pay attention. Be willing to look at the scary things. It's okay to make mistakes. It's part of the learning process. As long as you are really trying to increase your wholesome states, despite all the unwholesome ones that may come up, you're going in the right direction, and take advantage of good, trusted friends. And they don't even necessarily have to be Buddhist. As long as there's somebody who is very moral and you feel is wise, they can be a great Kalyanamitta. So hello to Victoria. Hope you're doing well. So that is the last question that I see online. So I'm going to call the live stream to an end at this point. Thank you all for attending. May you all be happy, well, and peaceful. As a slight announcement, just in case some people haven't seen it on the Facebook or the YouTube here, Monk Chat is being moved to 8 o'clock a.m. on Fridays so that Bhante Sudaso and Ayasoma can join from over in Italy. And we won't be having our Friday evening live streams at all anymore. Other than that, things will pretty much be continuing as usual. For the people that are local, we will be entering winter retreat soon. So our Wednesday through Friday tea time won't be happening, but we will still be open for our Saturday 6 o'clock, well, 5 o'clock tea time is open on Saturday, as well as our 6 o'clock to 7:30 p.m. program, and our Sundays will be continuing to run as normal. So our 8 o'clock a.m. volunteer hours, the 11 o'clock meal offering. We recommend people show up around 10:30 if they're interested in that. And our meditation program from 1 o'clock to 4 o'clock. So, Suki Hotu, everybody. May you be happy, well, and peaceful. May you always have access to the Dhamma, affinity to practice the Dhamma, good conditions to practice the Dhamma. May you always be reborn where the Dhamma is available, and may you soon realize the threefold bliss. Have a wonderful rest of your day, everybody.